This RealAg Radio podcast episode is brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. Coragen Max Insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well as downloads continue to increase. We really appreciate everybody joining the RealAg community and being a part of this show every single weekday. Okay, today on the show, we've got Jim Wiesemeyer, great friend of RealAgriculture. He is going to be here. He's a DC policy analyst. He's going to break down what exactly is happening as of this week between the U.S. and China in this very much growing aura of tension around trade. You could call it a trade war, escalating tariffs, big ask to neighboring countries, to like Australia, Japan. It's going to be coming Canada's way as well in terms of what the U.S. would like to see, how they would like to see those countries deal with China going forward. So definitely it's the kind of season where, hey, pick a side, everybody. And that seems to be that's kind of what we expected as well that is happening. We're also going to talk today to Keith Currie. He is the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Keith's going to talk about the CFA Ag Leaders debate that I co-moderated last week. What were some of the highlights, the lowlights? What do we wish we would have had time for? What were some of the kind of surprises in terms of what was said? So we'll talk to Keith. And I've got some general thoughts on the debate as well. And we're also going to hear from Chris Iverson in our product spotlight with FCL. They're going to talk about some of their private label products that they have to offer farmers on the prairies. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms, or you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Now, it is hot off the press at the time of recording today's show. Very hot off the press. But the Conservatives have released their policy platform. It is entitled Change for an Affordable Life for Safe Streets for Canada First. There's a lot of stuff in there. Now, there also is some stuff that is not in there, which I think is going to disappoint a lot of agricultural people, folks that are working in this industry. There is a lot there about workers working, and there's a lot in there about really some, obviously the carbon tax is in there, things like that. What is really missing is agricultural issues, which is somewhat surprising considering the fact that the level of support that farmers across the country have for the Conservative Party. If you look at some of the rural ridings and how the votes are, there's cutting of it. You could say that there's issues in the platform that kind of cut around the edges of agriculture. Like, for example, cutting income tax by 15%. Okay. You could say that affects farmers. That's not an ag issue. We've got Canada First TFSA top up, boots, not suits, lower taxes and secure retirement for seniors, Canada shovel-ready zones, Canada Energy Corridor, unleash Canadian resources, axe the carbon tax, ag issue, something ag is, but that's the Liberals are promising that as well. So that's kind of been pushed to the side at this point. Life sentences for the worst offenders, launch interprovincial free trade. Again, you got to convince me that this is going to be the key to unlocking our economy. There is issues with interprovincial free trade, and there's work to be done there. But I think some people are kind of overselling some of the benefits, but that's just kind of based on the conversations I've been having. Axe the sales tax on made in Canada cars, keep workers working, cut regulations by 25%. Okay, that's you could say that's there's ag issues to be dealt with there. You know what's kind of missing here is trade. Not a lot on trade. We're an exporting nation. We've been heavily critical of the current government, well, under Prime Minister Trudeau, highly critical of the fact that they really didn't focus on trade enough. The Conservative policy platform feels very liberalish in terms of where it values trade. We're an exporting nation. If we are not exporting, we have got a problem in agriculture and in other industries as well. There's going to be a lot of people, I think, reach out, everybody, and let me know. But I think there's going to be some criticism on how light agriculture has fit into this Conservative policy platform. So I encourage you to go to conservative.ca/change and read for yourself and send me your thoughts and see what you think. But that's my instant reaction here, is that the Conservative policy platform for change is a little light in the world of agriculture, but your thoughts are very welcome. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got Jim Wiesemeyer, DC policy analyst, with us right after this.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
It's time for today's Product Spotlight, and joining me now is Jason Mann. He's president of Genesis Fertilizers. Transportation costs obviously are a huge component of the price of fertilizer. So how does leveraging the Port of Churchill and the Hudson's Bay Railway, so through the Arctic Gateway Group, how does this help reduce the cost and provide more stable access to fertilizer for prairie farmers specifically?
So we're trying to open up new supply channels. There's not many suppliers in the market of phosphate today. So if we have the competitiveness of being able to go buy Panamax vessels from a supplier overseas, we should be able to get a better purchase price. We can have a little bit more efficient logistics. So if we can get it here on a vessel to Churchill, then we're really talking about maybe only 1,000 miles of rail to get it into Western Canada. And likely at a better rail rate. Because we're having this partnership with Arctic Gateway Group, we'd be looking at favorable rail rates for a large portion of that trackage from Churchill down to the Paw.
For anyone who's looking for more information, head on over to the Genesis Fertilizers website.
Maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MMP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. You just got to visit mmp.ca to find out more. Joining us right now is DC policy analyst Jim Wiesemeyer. Jim, how we doing?
Always good to be on your show, Shaun.
Yeah, lots happening. Don't know where to start. So interesting, in your news update this morning, I saw that U.S. farmers might be a little bit on the teeter-totter when it comes to Trump trade policy, or what's happening with these tariffs?
Well, yeah, farmers are always nervous, not only about their crop and the weather, but also about policy until they get what they want. That's one side. And two, as they see the market, especially China, you're going to, in the next few months, you're going to see China's trade with the U.S. zero, big goose eggs.
Yeah.
And that's going to grow in market psychology. On the other side, they're really worried about getting the corn crop planted, so to balance that. But we're in a high risk environment, Shaun. In my speeches, I say I've never seen a time in my 50 years covering Washington politics that a policy-driven environment has such high risk but high benefits. So we're going to see in the next few months, relative to Trump's trade policy.
China's been pretty slow, I guess, is the one way to describe it, getting to the negotiating table. Is this frustrating for the White House, or is this the expected sort of timeline? What's your thought on the pace?
It's been frustrating to President Trump, but he should know that China always plays the long ball, and Xi Jinping, their leader, will not come right away to seek talks with Trump, just because that would be seen as caving into him. I do see by the end of this year, Trump and Xi Jinping talks, unless this relationship continues to unravel. What's interesting is that several of Trump's cabinet people, Peter Navarro, the trade advisor, who the New York Times this week said hates trade, and others, Marco Rubio, are very hawkish when it comes to China. Trump is not so much. That's what's so ironic on this. He wants to deal with Xi Jinping, similar to what we saw in phase ones in Trump's first administration. Bottom line, I eventually see another trade agreement with China, but when, I have no idea.
It's hard to, I find, get a rope around when we say we're negotiating a trade deal, the depth to that. Or is it, picking around the fringe? Is it just, stamping a new date on what you were already doing? Because we're talking, what was it, like 90 trade deals in 90 days or 75 in 90 days? Like, we're talking about an astronomical amount. Do they have the capacity to do this at USTR?
No, I don't think they do. And that's what Navarro said, 90 trade agreements in 90 days. Well, okay, yeah. Sorry, take that bet. It's not going to happen. And whenever you're dealing with India, that's the one that we have optimistic news today, because Vice President Vance is over there talking. But I've covered India my whole career. You can get up to the very end of negotiations and they'll either throw in new issues, and it usually never comes to pass. We've seen that in the World Trade Organization over the years. But here's what the market needs right now, because the dollar is plummeting. The bond markets is sending signals they're nervous. Trump is fighting the adage, don't fight the Fed. Well, he's fighting the Fed. And I know he's frustrated because the Fed chairman has been political. But the market needs a template of a successful new trade agreement, whether it's with Japan, South Korea, which I think will come about, and the long ball India, because then they'll use that as a template, Shaun, to at least get a semblance of stability in the trade policy arena.
Read a couple of reports yesterday that the Trump administration is encouraging trade partners, Japan and there's probably a whole list we could fill in there, to pushing them in regards to how they should be dealing with China. What exactly is the ask here?
Well, the ask is we're separating from China in not all, but most things geopolitically. And so that's where both countries, China is telling, their trading partners, hey, don't work an agreement with the United States at the detriment of Beijing. And the U.S. negotiators are saying, really relative to national security and other things, that they want to cut China off at the pass. This is a major war between U.S. and China, not limited to trade.
Yeah, well, and what works its way in here is countries like, just use Australia and Japan, for example, their proximity to China, although they don't get along all the time, they have a closer proximity than to the U.S. That's a big rope of trust that you're asking those countries to say, don't do business with China.
Yeah, we call that a conundrum. Right? Yeah. It's a conundrum on it. And we eventually have to get back to, again, the semblance, whatever semblance is going to be in the future in U.S. trade policy. And that brings up Canada and Mexico. I think Trump did make a major mistake by taking on Canada and Mexico. So let's hope after your elections, April 28th? Yeah, I see stability returning to U.S.-Canada relations after your elections, because we have a North American market, and if they want to do that that's not going to be a success. And so I think Kevin Hassett at the National Economic Council, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, have told Trump that, and he realizes it. We just it's a timeline. I think the Canadian elections are going to push a renewed thrust to U.S., Canada, Mexico agreement.
We've talked a little bit on this show about the U.S. strategy in regards to Chinese-made ships and fleets that have Chinese ships in them. There is some overhang here to Canada, which could be shippers going around the U.S. and, trying to ship through a country like Canada or Mexico, which is going to create a whole second level tier of issues between Canada and the U.S. What's the strategy here, and what's the update? What are they? Because they've backed off a little bit, right?
Oh, they backed off a lot, I think, relative to agriculture. Have you noticed the Aggies have not complained lately on this, and they were just putting out press releases galore on their fear of this. But when the rules came out, they won't say it publicly, but they were breathing a lot easier now. So I don't think there'll be much impact on the state of agriculture on those rules. Also, they're going to be back end loaded anyway. It's going to be implemented in the future. This will be part of upcoming Xi Jinping and Trump negotiations and their top officials. So this is, I think, a strategy that they're putting out that shot across the bow. This is what could happen. We'll negotiate this to give China something in return to getting something they want from China. So bottom line, Shaun, I just don't. Now, I'm not saying there won't be any impact on these on these levies on Chinese ships, but not for U.S. agriculture in a major way anymore.
Yeah, it is kind of a bit of a pattern, right? Throw out a very, very aggressive change of policy tactic. Here's how we're going to deal with this. Everybody goes, whoa, and then everyone runs around for 2 weeks, and then there's a peeling off, and it's like it's definitely a natural course of action for this administration.
Yeah, it's like when you were growing up and your father told you he was going to whack you if you continued to do something. Well, it changed your attitude, didn't it? And so the whack didn't come. It's similar to that, but that's Trump 101. That's how he negotiates, period. Yeah, but again, I say to farmers in my speeches, this thing is really big here because we've got long-term strategy involved here. The thing I can't come to grips is the long-term potential damage this is done to the U.S. reliability clause in trade. And that can have implications where investments in other countries that we saw after the Carter grain embargo, after future sales suspensions. So that's going to be a hurdle that's not going to go away easily. Then you have foreign policy. How do you deal with these things in the future? Because this is not a one-off. We're in a different world right now, which means that you have to have a more flexible foreign policy to take these things into consideration. And that's why this upcoming budget reconciliation measure that I think Congress will pass will hopefully include a major change for reference prices for U.S. farm program crops. That will better be a far better safety net for them, Shaun.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap up here, Jim, I want to talk about the Fed. We've heard like you mentioned, the president's not happy with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. Now he's given the nickname, I think, Mr. Too Late. Powell's term
and loser, Mr.
Loser. Now the term ends in May. You talk about
May 2026. May 2026.
Yes, thank you. It's over a year. Yeah. It's just over a year. You talk about disruption in the market. Dismiss the Fed chair a year early, that creates uncertainty. We could speculate who's going to be the replacement in a year from now, but that move now, Jim, wow.
Yeah, the market adage is you don't fight the Fed. Well, he's fighting it. Now, I understand his frustration relative to, I personally believe that Jerome J. Powell has been political because you'll recall during the Biden years, when he was asked a question, do you think the Biden administration is spending way too much money here, and will that impact your monetary policy? And he shied away from that. He said, well, we don't comment on policy, things like that. Well, he's commenting on policy now. So what was good for Biden is not good for Trump. And that's where your politics comes into play here. Yeah. But Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, told him last week, don't do this because the bond market is already sending signals that your interest rates could go a lot higher than anyone realizes. So yeah, that's a powder keg, but that's Trump. You're not going to stop him. It's just, that's Trump.
No, following that one very closely. Any insight into why President Trump endorsed Liberal or current Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is the Liberal and not the Conservative? I know it probably doesn't get a lot of headlines in the U.S., but people sure talk about it up here.
Yeah, that I'm not quite sure, but I'll find out. I'll ask now on that one. But as I said, maybe he knows where the wind's blowing up there. Yeah, I would think that's probably one reason. Trump likes winners. Okay, and two, maybe he's more willing to deal with him on things. Now, recall, Trump likes to spend money too. In certain areas. Yeah.
Not necessarily a fiscal conservative, is he?
No, absolutely not. And look, he used to be a former Democrat. Look, all the Democrats he has in his administration. Even Peter Navarro used to be a Democrat, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Hey, Jim, awesome stuff. Always great to chat with you. Thank you so much
for
joining us here today.
Anytime.
That's Jim Wiesemeyer, DC policy analyst. Hey, Vaderstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types. Visit vaderstad.com to find out more. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with FCL. And we are joined right now by Chris Iverson. He's the manager for private brand portfolio with Ag Solutions at FCL. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Very good. Thanks, John. And you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Spring's inching a little bit closer, which I think everybody is pretty excited about. So today we're going to talk about the private brand products that FCL's been working on. Why make this investment? Why are you focused on this?
I think for us, the big thing is, we're a co-op. Our members are asking for it. And, that's probably the number one objective. But, I think we quite often see where a grower has to make or is choosing to make an agronomic sacrifice to chase economics. And I think that's really the big motivation behind, the 22 products that we've got today in our portfolio, from pre-seeds to in-crop, desiccants, surfactants, fungicides, all those products have been added to really overcome a challenge where someone had a real agronomic need and couldn't get it, inside of a program or something like that they were looking for. So, yeah, that's really why we're investing in it.
Is there any sacrifice? Like, is there a difference between the co-op private brand labeled products versus more the traditional private brands?
I think that's one of our key differentiators. And a big one for us is, where we source our products from. Agriculture is very important. I mean, in Western Canada, that's where we live. That's where we work. And, agriculture is the backbone of a lot of the communities that we're in. And I think when we are adding our products, we're really focused on, sourcing those products from people who are investing in the future of agriculture. looking at research and development. It cost them $1/3 billion to bring a new product to the market in 10 years, and no public funding there to do that. We feel it's important that as we're, adding products to our list, that we're supporting those who are going to take that money that we're giving them and reinvest it in new research and development. Because let's face it, we're losing actives way faster than we're gaining them today. Between social pressures and resistance, the number of actives that are becoming not relevant anymore are far greater than the new ones that are getting introduced. So it's very important to us and to be supporting that in the industry.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate reality indeed. Where do you see the future of the co-op private brand portfolio going?
I think, here again, because we're a co-op, it'll go where the members lead us, where they want us to be pursuing. But, I think there is a strong future for the private brand. And I think, as, we face, pressures from, around the globe on working together, we need to focus on, bringing these things home and building them right here in Western Canada, which, with our products, they're all packaged and a lot of them formulated at IPCO right in Winnipeg. And, taking that, that strong initiative, that unified initiative, and saying, hey, we want to invest in Western Canadian agriculture and where it's going in the future. So I think the future is bright for our private brand portfolio in basically filling those voids where a grower needs an active ingredient and is struggling to get it.
Yeah, in the market, this is a strategy that's often called white labeling.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the audience is probably asking the why of this from the standpoint, you've explained co-op's why.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of the manufacturer, why would they do this and put their product with your brand on it?
Yeah, and I think from a manufacturer's perspective, grower programs were designed to reward, to reward loyalty, and that's really their motivation. But in a lot of cases, manufacturers don't necessarily have every active ingredient that a grower needs on his farm. So there is those odd things here and there where they have to, if they're solidly in one manufacturer's program, but they need one active from another one, where they'll sometimes make the wrong decision, have to choose the economics over the agronomics because I just can't, I can't max out another program, or I can't access that. So I think, a major manufacturer has an opportunity to present their active ingredient through our private brand to that grower to fill that void. And I think that's the real opportunity for those major manufacturers too in our private brand.
Now, Chris, if somebody wants more information on FCL's private brand portfolio, where do they go?
Yeah, and agro.crs is our website. So if you go on agro.crs, click the crop protection banner on the top, bring you to all of our products, and definitely keep an eye out there because there's new ones getting added all the time.
Yeah, and of course, if you walk into one of your local outlets, right, make sure you ask that local representative for sure.
Yeah, those local co-ops, tremendous agronomic resource, and not only agronomic resource, an economic resource as well, to help you navigate. There's a lot of options out there today. So, lean on that local co-op advisor to give you a hand to navigate some of that stuff if you need it.
Yeah, great point. Chris, thanks a lot for joining us here today for this product spotlight.
You bet. Thanks, Shaun.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit Corteva.ca to learn more.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, Lemken Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and the best part is at great prices. Go to lemkendemo.com for more information and request that demo. That's lemkendemo.com. Joining us right now is the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, based out of Ontario. It is Keith Currie. Keith, how are we doing?
Doing good, Shaun. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Weather cooperating out your way?
Well, it is getting closer to spring if you look at the calendar, but we've had the few warm days, but mostly cool so far. But we are getting some moisture, so that certainly is encouraging. But we now, once the snow is gone, people get itchy and want to get scratching. So it'd be nice if it warmed up and we could maybe think about doing that.
Well, you'd be off to a really good start using that Lemken, planter that we just talked about. Anyway, let's get to it. Keith, last week, we had the Ag Leaders Debate that CFA has put on for quite some time over I don't know how many years of elections CFA has done it, and I was able to co-moderate for the second time, had a fabulous time. What's been some of the feedback from the debate?
We've generally very positive feedback. I think we're well over 2,000 views on our YouTube channel now. People have looked at it, and we're certainly doing another blast out to our membership this week to have people check it out, members check it out to see what the political candidates from various parties are saying about agriculture specifically. And I think that's certainly very important to people. From an organizational perspective, we know that we're the big boys on the playing block. We just don't get maybe as much airtime as people want to give us. When you're the largest manufacturing sector in Canada and one of the biggest GDP contributors, it's pretty important. So understanding where potential political parties or governments are going to go on this is really important. So I think that'll be of interest to our members.
Yeah, yesterday on RFD TV, I was talking about how the fact that, a lot of times in federal elections, agriculture is looking for just a mention, like just somebody mentioned food production, just somebody at some point, even if it's like a part of a sentence, and we'd claim victory. This is one where a lot of agriculture's issues have worked their way into the mainstream, and that's, thanks to some of the trade issues with the United States and Canada. And so a lot of talk about trade diversification, infrastructure investment, interprovincial trade barriers. So it seems like agriculture is a little bit more in the mix here in this election as an issue.
Yeah, it's obviously come to the forefront with, in particular, the tariff issue with both the United States and, for us in agriculture, of course, China and what it's doing to some of our commodities with tariffs that have been placed on them. But I think, overall, what I'm looking for is a change. And what I mean by that, Shaun, is whoever forms the government, whether it's a return of the Liberals or the Conservatives or some combination thereof, I want to see government change their thought process on agriculture. And I don't want to come at this from a, woe is me perspective, but more about look what you're missing out on by not really investing in the industry as a whole. What we can do for you from a labor perspective, we're already employing 2.5 million-ish people in this country. What we can do from a food security aspect, the environmental pillars that we can fill. And most importantly for Canadians, I think, is the economic piece, which, we've proven how we can drive the economy. So who's going to make the changes of mindset to make sure that agriculture has those opportunities and fulfill the opportunities that will help the government of the future going forward?
Was there a question or a topic you wish I would have brought up with the candidates?
Well, I think just that very question of what do you see the potential of agriculture being and how are you going to get there? Although that's very open-ended and maybe might end up being long-winded. We seem to focus a lot on and it's human nature, on reacting to what's going on. That's natural given what's happening south of the border, that we want to make sure that we're protected as best we can be. But you certainly didn't hear a lot of what we're going to do to really promote the industry as opposed to what we're going to do to help protect the industry. And I think we need a bit of both, but there's not, typically now in government, you don't see long-term visions. And I wish there was some kind of a long-term strategy by somebody, by anybody, on how we can really, really elevate this industry into where it needs to be.
Yeah, being proactive makes a lot of sense. When you say protect the industry, protect it from whom?
Well, protection from things like non-tariff and technical trade barriers. We have agreements with 51 trade agreements out there. I'm not sure our government now has stepped up the way they need to with respect to some of these trade deals and making our partners, our trading partners, accountable for some of the non-tariff barriers that they're putting in place. Some of that has to do with the fact that the appellate body for the WTO dispute resolution panel isn't filled, so they can't really make decisions, and so that doesn't help either. But I think a strong government that says, "Hey, okay, stop the nonsense. How do we figure this out?" And I haven't seen that, and I think that would just continue to help us open even more markets around the world.
Yeah, the Block's Yves Perron was in the middle of the set, and he had liberal Cody Blois and conservative John Barlow on either side, and both Barlow and Blois, they got after it. Perron was like in the middle of it. There was definitely a number of issues where there was some pretty stiff debate between two people that respect each other quite a bit.
Yeah, and it was certainly they were standing up for their parties and their party's position. You also have to look at it, Shaun, that you had two fairly seasoned veteran politicians and two people that were deeply immersed in the agriculture field. I mean, you have the chair of the Ag Committee and the vice chair of the Ag Committee. So they're certainly well versed in all the issues, as they should be as the Minister of Agriculture and the agriculture critic. And they're really the ones that they showed their seasonedness, I'll say, of being a politician, being immersed in the issues. Yves Perron did jump in a fair bit, but you also have to understand the geographic region that he's representing, which is not all of Canada. And then you had two other candidates that maybe weren't quite as versed in the ag politics that maybe got sidelined a little bit, but that is what it is.
Well, and I'm trying to remember what the topic was. I think it was about trade, but probably the stiffest shot of the night was the Block's Yves Perron, who said Canada need to grow a spine. And I saw some of the other candidates sort of do a little bit of a, whoa, this is heating up. That was probably the sharpest dig I had heard.
Well, and that goes back to what I just said a little bit earlier, that, I want our government standing up for agriculture in general, whether that's, the non-tariff trade barriers you're dealing with, whether that's simply looking at the competitiveness issue that we have to deal with when you look south of the border and some of the programs and the ad hoc funding that our farming neighbors to the south get, making it hard for us to compete, or harder for us to compete. And simply having the right regulatory framework in place to allow us to do what we do best. And sometimes that's growing a spine. And I was not at all upset with that comment, I can tell you. And that's something that I think that we're going to look at going forward and how we can address the new government after April 28th.
I thought the NDP and the Greens sort of, very less experienced people on the ag file participating for those two parties, but they kind of showed how they're really kind of a general reflection of the overall race. They're really on the outside. They just kind of seemed to be the way that it was. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, Miss Rodriguez had a little bit of a communication issue, her English, and she admitted that, I think, during the debate, that her English wasn't as good as she'd hoped it would be. She's certainly a very smart woman. She has several degrees in the agriculture field, agriculture sciences, but didn't seem to portray that well. And certainly the Green doesn't have a deep platform. Personally, I was hoping someone like Alistair McGregor would have been there for the NDP, who's very well respected around the Ag Committee table and certainly within the Ag community, who probably would have had a better idea of the overall platform of the NDP, although it's not always strong as it is. And, sending someone in who continued to harp on this corporate agriculture, given the assumption that, we're all just under the guise of big mega corporations, not understanding that 98% of our farms are family owned and operated in this country, was a little misleading at times, but that is what it is.
Yeah, the NDP definitely went after large corporations. That was a big part of her message she wanted to get across, is, very much against some comments about intellectual property, big companies, big influence, things like that were definitely a push from the NDP for sure. I think it's really good to get the opinions of, it sort of shows the vastness of opinion, but also definitely shows how, with the Liberals and the Conservatives, the ag policy is, there's differences, but they are somewhat, in the Carney version of the Liberal government, of the Liberal Party, at least at this time, it's very close to what the Conservatives were talking about. There was minute differences between the two.
Yeah, at the core, they are very similar. Execution may be different, but I think where you're going to see the big differences, for me at least, is the Conservatives are going to go after a lot more of the tax-related issues, for example, and certainly red tape. And I think Cody Boy was certainly talking about some of the red tape reduction, getting rid of some, or aligning things like CFIA and PMRA into handling agricultural issues better, having conversations that way. But they were similar with a little bit different approach, and certainly, all five candidates were consistent around supply management. They were all consistent around, sort of getting better trade discussions going, whether that's with existing partners or new ones. So there was some similarities there, and I think the one thing that really I was looking through the Liberal platform that Cody didn't bring up, but they talk about controlled environment for agriculture, and I don't know what that means, and that potentially could be a little worrisome, but it depends how it all comes out.
Well, Keith, really appreciate you joining us here today on RealAg Radio, and congratulations on CFA running a great debate, and it was great to be a participant.
Well, thanks, Shaun, and I'm pleased that you were able to join us and moderate it. It was very successful, and hopefully we could continue that tradition.
If you are interested in watching that debate, you can find it on the CFA YouTube channel. We've been talking to Keith Currie, President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Right now, people in agriculture and food are facing challenges that can feel overwhelming. If you need to talk, access the National Farm Crisis Line at 1-866-FARMS-01. That's 1-866-327-6701. It's 24/7 confidential help when you need it. Farm Credit Canada also has tools to support your long-term mental health. Learn more and access the crisis line at fcc.ca/wellness.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, in response to client requests, CCIA now offers a privacy consent option that lets us share your contact info to help recover lost, stray, or found livestock, all while keeping other details private. You can learn more by going to support.canadaid.ca. Okay, so we've covered a lot of we heard geopolitical issues from Jim Wiesemeyer. We talked about some domestic stuff with Keith Currie of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. You heard some of my my early reaction to the Conservative platform and kind of the omission of agriculture there. So we covered a lot of ground here today. It's interesting and I encourage you to watch that CFA debate. It's a good 2 hours. So, buckle in and maybe get your popcorn and maybe a cold one to get through it all. But it's fascinating to me how similar what we hear from the Conservatives and Liberals are. Like, it just kind of proves how far to the center the Liberals have come under Mark Carney, at least at this juncture of this political cycle. I think it's a little bit difficult for the Conservatives to separate themselves. And there's going to be a lot of you that are going to say, and probably there's an element of, your right to do so, not necessarily believing that the Liberals have shifted this fast, just so quickly, so much. And where has the common question I get from everybody is, where has this been the last 10 years? And that's what a lot of the people in the industry are asking about. But it definitely has taken some wind out of the sails of the Conservatives for sure. And you'll hear that in the debate if you watch the whole thing. What will be frustrating for some of you is if you're in the supply managed industry, you're going to feel that, just the idea of, hey, we're going to protect supply management is not enough. It's an empty vessel of a statement. And for some of you that are against supply management, you're going to say that, why are we protecting it? All these parties continue to protect it. They're protecting. And protecting can mean a lot of different things. And I think across the board, whether it's Conservatives or it's Liberals, take 282 out of the equation. Okay. Bill C-282 was there to essentially prevent any future government from negotiating away market access for the supply managed industries. That bill has not passed, it has not become legislation, so it's off the table. And so all the parties have resorted back to, we're going to protect supply management. Well, that leaves a lot of flexibility for whoever forms the next government, because you can give away market access and still argue that you're protecting supply management. And here's the crux. We're probably, honestly, nobody's happy at the end of the day. That's kind of the reality of it. And we've been here before. This is where we were with the CPTPP. This is where we were with CETA. This is where we were with the renegotiation of the NAFTA agreement. So we should be used to this kind of scenario. And that is what's upsetting to people on both sides of the aisle of this issue, for sure. Where there also could be a little bit more focus, I think, is in the area of regulations, where and some of this has to do with, say, variety registration, the use of data from other jurisdictions, and Liberal Cody Blois, when he was the chair of the Ag Committee, this was a pretty big focus of his. He had a private members bill in this regard to try to move things forward faster, to bring technologies to the market much more quickly for Canadian farmers, especially from a competitive standpoint compared to other areas like the U.S. or Australia. What we heard in the debate as well is that there is an interest in talking and making investments in something like trade infrastructure. We can talk about trade, but we got to make sure that we have the investments in place, the structure in place, to allow the capacity in place to allow ourselves to get product from middle of Saskatchewan, let's say, to the port of Vancouver. That's just one example. And you could pick on a lot of other examples. If you're in southwestern Ontario trying to get things to the port of Hamilton, do we have enough capacity there? All of those things need to be asked and looked at, and we need to move on them. And you've heard my rants and raving about, Canada need to take action in the past. We don't need to rehash that one. But you got the capacity to do so. The other thing I tried to bring up in the debate was, and I mentioned that there wasn't a lot of talk from the candidates in this regard, was what are people on the ground in those markets? So what are we doing from a people on the ground standpoint? If Indonesia is, if the Indo-Pacific market is important to us, if we want to expand trade with countries like Japan, if we want to do more business with India, if we want to do more business with Europe, do we have enough people on the ground in order to make that happen and push that forward? Really don't hear, when we bring this up, I don't hear a lot of people out there saying, yes, we do. And a part of that has to do with nobody wants to hear about, everybody wants to talk about spending cuts and not, well, where could we reprioritize and put the money where it needs to be. And a part of that, I think, is in some of these international markets to really build our trade portfolio. And if you really are committed, Canada, to diversifying trade, that's an example of something that we really do need to focus on, is do we have enough people on the ground? Now, the reaction so we had the Ag Leaders debate on Thursday, and then we had the Leaders debate on Thursday night. And Abacus did some exit polling. You can go to abacusdata.ca. Hoping to have David Coletto on the show post-election next week and break down how everyone voted and what led to the victory of whoever is going to form government. But there was one of the questions he asked was, based on what you saw or heard, do you think each of these leaders made a very positive impression, positive, no impression, or negative, or very negative impression? 59% of Canadians felt that Mark Carney made a positive impression. 53% said Pierre Poilievre. So a little bit more people think that that Carney was more positive. 30% of Canadians felt that Pierre Poilievre made a negative impression, while only 22% thought that for Mark Carney. But another question that got a lot of attention on the weekend news shows was, which leader did more to win your vote? For the people that watched all of the debate, 47% of them said Pierre Poilievre, 37% said Mark Carney. Now, overall, which leader did more to win your vote? Pierre Poilievre was 43% and Mark Carney was 40%. So, although people had a more positive reaction to what they saw from Mark Carney, more people thought that Poilievre did something to win their vote. Now, the Conservatives are probably going to need a bigger number than that to win the election. But I think that shows that there is some opportunity here for some movement for the Conservatives to their side. The trouble is, even if it's a dead heat, based on the voting efficiency, it doesn't work out very well for the Conservatives and probably leads to a liberal victory. And so another question here from Abacus Data, which leader did more to lose your vote? 29% said Pierre Poilievre and 21% said Mark Carney. So that probably evens that out a little bit. If you watched a little of the debate, you were very turned off by Pierre Poilievre. 31% of people that watched a little bit of the debate thought that Poilievre lost their vote, where only 18% said Carney, which is another interesting stat. So the more debate, well, actually, I can't say that either. The more debate you watched, the more Carney won your vote, and Poilievre was pretty much even, whether you watched all of it or you watched a little bit of it. The people that watched some were the least of that category, but just kind of fascinating some of that work that Abacus Data did post-election. Would love your thoughts. I've encouraged you to check out the Conservative platform. My reaction, we're a little short on ag. Probably could use a little bit more. I'm disappointed in that. We're going to try to get John Barlow, MP for Foothills, also the Shadow Minister of Agriculture. He participated in the Ag Leaders debate. There's more things that John talked about in that Ag Leaders debate that is not in that policy platform. And so I just, for some reason, didn't get pushed into the platform. Curious on that, but I want your feedback, your thoughts. What do you think about where we sit here less than a week away from Canadians voting on who is going to form the next government here in Canada? Because Canada obviously has a lot of things to take on post-election, one of them being how to handle improving relationships with the United States and President Trump for sure. So if you have any feedback, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Tomorrow on the show, we've got a Real Ag Markets, and we're going to get some more reaction to the upcoming election and a whole lot more. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And, of course, we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this Real Ag Radio episode brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.